Good morning, evening, and afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Reed, and I'm the online event specialist here at Genesis, and I'll be the moderator for today's webcast. And I'll start by saying welcome, and thank you all for joining today's presentation titled Humans and Bots, How to Blend Human Skills and AI to Build Customer Intimacy and Drive Growth. So to ensure that we have the best experience viewing this webcast, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, if you experience any problems viewing or listening to today's webcast, please refresh or make sure that your browser is up to date to support HTML5, as this usually fixes any console issues. It may help to switch over to Chrome or Mozilla Firefox as well, as these are the best browsers that support the webcast platform. And if you're still having trouble seeing the webcast screen, you do have the ability to enlarge the slides by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide window. Also, this webcast is designed to be an interactive experience between you and our presenters today. So at any time during the webcast, you can submit your questions in the Q&A window in the top middle, and we'll answer as many as we can throughout the presentation. However, if time does get away from us and we don't get to your question in the live setting, we will follow up with you within the next few business days following the webcast's conclusion. So just be on the lookout for those. And also be on the lookout for the recording from today's session. We will be emailing you the on-demand recording via On24 within the next few business days. And also feel free at any time during the webcast, you can check out the resources and the resource list below the Q&A window. Clicking through won't take you away, so don't worry about that. It'll just open up in a new tab in your browser. But these are resources that will really help expand some more on today's topic. And finally, we welcome and appreciate your feedback. So you'll have the opportunity to fill out a short survey on today's presentation. That survey can be found on the last icon below, or it'll just automatically show up at the end if you don't want to worry about it just yet. Okay, I promise that's it. So let's go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Today we have a pair of excellent presenters excited to discuss how you can reap the rewards in terms of efficiency, ability to scale, and enhance customer satisfaction with the deployment of AI across your customer journey. It is my pleasure to welcome Claire Beatty, the Editorial Director in Asia from MIT Technology Review Insights, as well as Genesis's very own Joe Shufo, the Product Marketing Director. So with that being said, I'm actually going to go ahead and hand things off to our very special guest and the woman of the hour. Claire, the floor is yours. And it sounds like you're still on mute, Claire.
I am. There we go. You can tell it's live. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining this webinar tonight. I'm very excited to share this research with you that we've been working on with Genesis. So my name's Claire Beatty. I'm the Editorial Director for International Markets at MIT Technology Review. This is the second year that we've been working on a research program with Genesis. In the first year, we looked at how companies are building iconic brands through customer service excellence. And this year, we've gone a level deeper to really look at how companies are using artificial intelligence in their customer journeys, what are the opportunities and how they're tackling those, and also some of the challenges that they're facing. So really excited to share the results of that research with you and have a conversation about some of the findings. So just to go and look at what we talked about in the research, we did a global survey of 600 companies across the US, Latin America, across Europe, and across Asia. And across industries, the executives that we reached out to were heads of customer experience, heads of sales and marketing, heads of customer contact, and also heads of technology. And we asked them, how far are you along your AI journey in your customer experience processes? What are the strategies and objectives that you have for that technology deployment? Which technologies are you looking at? And are you looking at them now or in the future? And then what are some of the results that you're achieving? And so we published this late last year, and very excited to look at that a bit more deeply now. So the first thing we looked at is, to what degree are you using AI in your customer experience processes? And what we found was that nearly all of the 600 companies that we surveyed for this report are some way along that AI journey. So more than a quarter have made significant investments, and over half are currently acquiring those capabilities. So not particularly surprising, but still finding that large companies and those that are leading overall in the customer experience are further down this road. So Josh, we've got a question for the audience. Would you mind forward now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way this is going to work, guys, is right now in your slide window, you should see a poll. So the poll today that we want to ask you is AI driven more by the need to improve efficiency or customer intimacy? So what you could do is just go ahead and select the answer that you're interested in, and then go ahead and hit submit. And then here in a few seconds, we'll take a look at the results. And so in the meantime, I'll pass it back to you guys. Yep.
Yeah, this will be great to see as we have the report, the data that came with that, to see if it's likewise here in this group that we have today.
Well, I'm sure most people answering this poll would like to select both, because they're definitely not mutually exclusive categories. But we were interested in this survey to see whether companies are primarily looking at AI as a tool to drive efficiency, or whether they're hoping to build customer intimacy and look at greater personalization. So I'm also very curious to see what our audience will say to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you have to choose. You have to pick one, at least for our poll's sake.
So with that, I'll go ahead and count it down. You got 5 seconds, people. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at those results. Okay, it looks like 58% of the folks in the audience said efficiency versus 41 said customer intimacy. What do you guys think about that?
Okay, so I think that's actually very consistent with the findings that we had in our research, and I'll show you in the next slide. So we were curious to see whether AI investments were driven more by efforts to improve efficiency, customer intimacy, and by that we mean gaining deeper customer insight, offering personalization, customization, and so on. And nearly all companies said that efficiency was a goal, but many said that customer intimacy was an increasing focus. And so what we found was at the larger companies, or those perhaps more sophisticated and further along the journey in customer experience, were focusing increasingly on customer intimacy. And perhaps that's because they've already made some gains in efficiency. And we also saw these going hand in hand. As companies are making gains in efficiency, that frees up their staff and resources to pursue further customer intimacy. And I believe we have another poll question at this point.
Yes, ma'am. So, folks, we're not done with you yet. This is like Jeopardy, so we want your participation here. So, the next question we're going to ask you is, what benefits have you seen so far from AI in your customer processes? So that could be customer call efficiency, speed of complaint resolution, brand visibility and recognition, improved agent satisfaction, migrating customers across channels, improved customer satisfaction, or none yet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave about another 30 seconds or so. So if you guys, I'll hand it back to you while we wait for those responses to come in, and then in about 30 seconds, I'll push the results.
Absolutely.
So Josh, what do you expect to be the top benefit that customers are seeing?
So this is going to be interesting. I actually spent a lot of time as a support engineer, and for me, one of the biggest ones was speed of complaint resolution, in that sometimes it's about getting that answer there really quickly. But I think this will change depending on who's responding to us today, too.
Yeah.
And Claire, where are you?
I'm going to close things out here in a second.
Yeah,
So we have
I think that
4, 3, 2, 1. Claire, I'm going to go ahead and push the results, but you can go ahead and say what you were thinking.
No, I think I agree. I think customer call efficiency will be.
It looks like our results are kind of split. So we have 17% for customer call efficiency, 9% for speed of complaint resolution, only about 1% is brand visibility and recognition, 4 for improved agent satisfaction. Oh, that's interesting. 2 for migrating customers across channels, with 10 improved customer satisfaction. But the majority of our audience here today said none yet. What do you guys think?
Ooh.
So I think that's interesting. Possibly customers are joining this call because they're interested in learning about artificial intelligence and the benefits that they can achieve. And so, yes, so the highest proportion of benefits that are being gained are in call efficiency, followed by improved customer satisfaction. So we can compare that. Well, I'll give you a case study first, and this story is a story about gaining efficiency. So I'm sure that most people in the audience have heard of Alibaba, really huge Chinese internet company, and they do so many things. But e-commerce is really one of their strengths, and they have a couple of big divisions, AliExpress and Taobao, which are huge e-commerce platforms in China. And just share an example with you about the efficiency that they've been able to gain through AI. So in China, there's this huge online shopping event. It's bigger than Black Friday. It's called Singles Day, and it's on the 11th of November. So in 2007, Alibaba generated $25 million in revenue on that one day, on Singles Day. And during that event, the company was able to solve 93% of its customer queries through AI-enabled chatbots. And just to give you the equivalent, that would have been about 120 million rounds of customer conversation, which would have required 83,000 human agents working round the clock on that day. So you can just see how companies are able to use this technology and scale. And we caught up with them again recently, and they told us that in 2018, they'd actually generated $30 billion revenue in 2018 Singles Day. So just an example there of just companies making huge efficiencies with AI. And as we look ahead, now I'm sharing some data from Gartner with you. And efficiency is going to become very, very important in the years ahead. And that's because we can expect transaction volume to grow exponentially. So this chart shows that between 2018 and 2022, transaction volume, customer service transaction volume, is expected to more than triple, particularly in areas like interactive voice response, search, and chatbots. So I think as we look ahead, customers are expecting to have those always-on channels. And during the interviews that we did for this research, we also heard anecdotally several times that as soon as companies deployed technologies in their customer service channels, they immediately saw a rapid growth in transaction volume as soon as they'd done that. So it's not as though automating these channels will lead to a reduction in interactions. They're going to grow substantially. So going back to the survey, we looked at what technologies that companies are deploying and how long they've had those in place. And on average, we saw that the top 5 customer experience-centric AI applications were being deployed at 9 out of 10 companies in our global survey. So, and amongst the customer experience leaders, those who were further ahead in their AI journey, most of the companies have been using those technologies for 2 years or more, and looking at things like automated self-service and followed by sentiment analysis were the big technologies that they're using. We were keen to know how companies are using AI to drive the brand. And what we found is that 2/3 of companies indicate that they're designing their AI tools with those brand alignment goals in mind, and that they're routinely analyzing conversations to see how they're comparing with brand attributes. And more than 80% of the survey respondents are using predictive AI to provide their agents with prompts during the calls, aligned brand messages to customer requirements. So you can see some of the ways that they're actually using AI to drive the brand. And going back to the poll question we had, and here are some of the categories that were reflected in that question. So when we look at the results that customers are achieving, the survey respondents report significant improvements in many areas of their customer experience. So speed of complaint resolution, as Josh mentioned earlier, call efficiency, and improved customer satisfaction. So one of the results that also came out of the survey was that agent satisfaction was improved significantly following the deployment of AI. So one of the findings I'd also like to draw out is around brand recognition. So we heard this in the survey and also anecdotally. So companies are benefiting from the brand perception that comes with being seen as a technology leader and using technology to respond to customers quickly and efficiently. So at this point, we have another poll question. Josh?
Thank you, Claire. Like I said, guys, we're not done with you yet. So this question is pretty straightforward. Are you using artificial intelligence in your customer processes? So you got 3 responses here. We have made significant investments in AI. We are currently acquiring AI capabilities, or we have basic automation installed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it back to you, Claire and Joe, and we'll give them another 30 seconds or so to answer, and then we'll take a look at the results together.
Yeah, and I think, again, it will be interesting to see how this compares to the report. Claire, do you have any assumptions for this one?
So I think given the last question, when we asked about the benefits that customers are seeing, we're going to see a lot of our audience AI capabilities that automated some functions already, and now really looking at rolling out AI. So that's what I expect to see. So in the global survey, it was only about 20% overall that were making significant investments in AI, except for those that small set of companies that are the leaders in this space.
All right, well, then with that, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the results together. So it looks like 10% of the audience have made significant investments in AI. 34 are currently looking to acquire AI capabilities, but over half of our audience today just have the basic automation installed. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that's in line with what we were expecting, too, especially with the prior responses.
Yeah, definitely. So looking to acquire AI capabilities, that was the biggest area that we saw in the survey as well. So companies are really on this journey right now. When we looked at the technologies that companies are acquiring, we saw that a lot of companies are rolling out these technologies within the last year. So a big period of experimentation, piloting different technologies across the customer journey, and trying new things. So I think it's very much in line with what we were expecting to see. So we talked a bit earlier about the benefits that companies are gaining across the customer journey with customers and also with their agents. And one of the areas that we were curious about exploring was how these benefits are like flowing back into the business, so to speak. So we saw that close to 90% of the survey respondents were benefiting from revenue growth, and about a third, by more than 10% actually, in the last 12 months. The companies, again, that had pursued AI the most aggressively were benefiting the most, just broadly in all of these categories. And across the survey, we saw high levels of improvement in customer lifetime value and in brand awareness. So we talked earlier about this kind of idea of, are you pursuing AI as a tool for driving efficiency, or are you looking to build customer intimacy, so more personalized customer journeys, more personalization, responding, dealing with the customer on their own terms and their own time. So if we look at the survey data by region, because we also broke this data down by North America, by Latin America, by Asia, and by Europe, we saw that Asia is much more strongly driven by efficiency than by customer intimacy, particularly in comparison with Europe and Latin America. And so if you remember, when we did this poll question earlier, there was probably a slightly higher proportion of the audience, this webinar, saying that they're focused on efficiency versus intimacy, which is definitely representative of what we found as well. So now I have a couple of regional breakdowns so we can see how the different regions are looking at AI as well. So the first one I'll show you is North America, their experience with AI. So how long has AI been in place in your customer engagement functions? And for the US, we actually broke this down by companies of different size. So nearly a third of large companies with over 30,000 employees have been using AI for more than 2 years. And what we found is, what was interesting is that even with quite relatively small companies, less than 3,000 staff, between 1 and 3,000, more than 80% have launched some form of technology. This is becoming very widespread in North America. And if we look at Latin America, and we didn't break this down by company size, we looked at companies of all different sizes, we also found that AI is being used to a greater degree than what we expected. In Mexico, in particular, nearly all of the companies in our sample have deployed AI technology. And also, Brazil, not too far behind. If we look at Europe, you can see overall a lot of companies using this technology. France and Germany were the earliest adopters. And then within the last year, we've seen Italy, very, very high growth, and Sweden and the UK are also very close as well. In Asia, so Southeast Asia, Japan and India launched AI the earliest. But now overall, Australia, New Zealand, China and Korea have caught up. So although in China and Australia and New Zealand, about 30% have been deploying this technology within the last year. So it just goes to show this is very, very new for a lot of companies in our sample. So I will just finish the sort of presentation part of this research by sharing a quote with you. This came from an executive who we interviewed for the report, Nick Holdsworth. He is leading service delivery for the Australian telecoms operator Telstra. And he said that for the last 30 years, the industry has been trying to persuade consumers to adopt technology. And now all of a sudden, customers are ahead and are expecting us to catch up. So that's where we are now, and I'm hoping that quote resonates with the audience. I'm curious to know whether that's something that resonates with you. So at this point, I'm going to bring Josh in. Josh, we talked about AI and the customer journey, and what do you see from the Genesys perspective as the leading use cases, how customers are using AI?
Absolutely. So to do that, let me go ahead and share my screen for a moment. And what I wanted to do was walk through a story with everyone. So just to introduce my name, I'm Joe Schufo. I'm a product marketing director here. But I started as a support engineer, and I spent some time as a solution consultant as well. The reason why I bring that up is I want that perspective to come through today as we walk through what an AI-powered journey would look like with Genesys. And so let's start with something simple, like an insurance website. And it could be a customer like Sarah has been reached out to by this insurance company Something we see quite often is you receive an email, and that email is something simple like, hey, if you have home insurance with us, guess what? You can get car insurance too at a discounted rate. The problem with that is when the customer clicks on that email, they spend time on the website. And if they can't find that information quickly available via search, or if they can't find that information quickly available just through navigating, we lose them. And this is so important because when we think about automation and self-service, if it's not easy to do, well, we're not serving the purpose. And going beyond that, just generating revenue. The whole point was we had them here, they're interested, and we didn't close on that. So one of the initial use cases of AI that I really wanted to highlight was predictive engagement, knowing when to engage at the right moment. And this is important because if you think about going to a store, if someone walks up to you and they bombard you the entire time asking, how can I help? What are you looking at today? That's noise, and you actually become dissuaded. But knowing when the right time to engage is so important, and knowing when the customer is exhibiting behavior that could be frustration is just as important. So what we can do through machine learning is understand through these journeys, as a customer navigates through the website, what are they trying to do? Can we understand the intent? Couple that with the idea that everything we're doing is based on business outcomes. So if I sent an email trying to get you interested into car insurance, and you're exhibiting behavior that shows that you might be looking for car insurance, that might be the best time to engage. So we've gotten someone like Sarah here who's interested in engaging with us in car insurance, and we've identified that. What's the best way to engage? And we may identify her as a hot prospect that goes straight to a human being, but as we noted today, there are an increasing amount of interactions coming through an increasing amount of channels. So leveraging something like a chatbot or a voice bot is an excellent way to triage this conversation. Is this person interested in car insurance? We can keep that personalization here by leveraging a chatbot to step in and say, I noticed you're looking at insurance. Is there a way I can help? Something that's so great about chatbots is they can leverage machine learning to understand the most impactful FAQ articles or knowledge-based articles, and then give that information to the customer in a contextual way through a conversation. But it could get even better. So maybe I am interested in getting started. I don't need to go to another web page to get started on this quote. I can actually drive it through the chatbot itself by having a normal conversation and answering the questions about starting that quote process on an insurance site. Now, this is typically where we see some of the issues again when we think about leveraging AI. We've got a customer who's interested. We've identified that, and we've started the process. But what if a question comes from the customer that is extremely difficult or very nuanced? Even better, what if there are regulations where we actually need a live person to sign off on this and give it the okay before we go ahead and complete that quoting process? So we have to catch up on that other side of the journey, and that's the employee journey here. The way we do that is by starting with what agent are we engaging with first. And that's so much more than just what language can that agent speak and what channel, like chat or phone call, are they able to work on. It's about how good are they at customer service? How skilled are they at auto claims? Are these areas that they're proficient in? Knowing this comes really in handy when we look at this later, because the next step is having those agents available at the right moment. A big topic, especially on the contact center side, is about forecasting and having those agents available at the right time. It's no longer just about call volume. We now have to understand how many interactions are coming in across voice, across chat, SMS, messaging applications. And we need to know that those agents are not only skilled in that language, but skilled in that technical proficiency and the right sentiment for the customers that are coming in. So the story starts to tie together. We've got a customer who's interested in fulfilling a car insurance application. We've identified that through machine learning in real time. We've got the agents in the right place. Now we can use AI to do what we call predictive routing. And that's about having the right agent at the right time. So a little story here. I am an only child. My wife is not. And my wife is very analytical. She wants an answer, and that's the end of the conversation. I, on the other hand, need to be cuddled. I need all the information in the world. I want to know how my day was and talk about it. Those are very different interactions. And so what we realize is these customer experiences can be exactly the same, but the response from a customer could be drastically different depending on who they are. So think about that with predictive routing. We have the cost-benefit analysis of a hot prospect waiting for someone to reach out. How long will it take for us to find the best agent in relation to them? This goes beyond normal KPIs like how quickly can someone answer that interaction, or is this the person that has the lowest average handle time? Instead, we're routing on business outcomes. So in this case, we're routing to this interaction to an agent that has the highest upsell score, leveraging machine learning to take into account things like skill set, things like demographics, even past interactions on their performance. So we've chosen the right agent. We see Connor Marshall was available in about 2 minutes, a really quick time to make this call back, and he's routed that outgoing interaction. So Connor's going to go ahead and reach out to Sarah, our customer in this case. Think about that chatbot interaction, because we always talk about AI helping the customer within a customer-facing window, but what about flipping the script for a moment and taking a look at AI from the perspective of how are our agents leveraging that? Well, initially, it's just about giving that information to the agent. So often, customers refer to a company as a single person. Hey, I spoke with you yesterday, or didn't you know I said this 2 weeks ago? We can keep that chat transcript immediately showing on the agent side, but using natural language processing, we're transcribing this voice call in real time. The benefit of that is on the right-hand side of the agent interface, we can start making suggestions. Those knowledge articles that we've identified as really useful in certain situations should be presented at the right time, instead of having an agent digging through that on their own, trying to leverage all of this with multitasking while they're on a real phone call. We can pop this at the right moment. Even better, we can start leveraging suggestions. Are there little critiques we've noticed at the right moment based around sentiment analysis that can be pushed to the agent while they're on this phone call? This means we have a linear journey, allowing the person to focus on the call, but curating that content at the exactly right moment based around a suggestion or knowledge-based articles. So we've wrapped up that phone call, but we're not really done yet. One thing that we've been leveraging AI for is getting the voice of the customer. So we talked about those skills from the agent, and we talked about making these assumptions using predictive engagement for those agents' abilities in relation to the customer. Once the customer's done, they've given us the sign-off, we can go ahead and ask for feedback. And this is the full loop here. Maybe we realize that our agent Connor might need training in sentiment ability. Maybe he's not as good in customer service as we would have thought, or maybe he's excellent. We can identify that by validating our assumptions in this feedback loop. Even better, when you think about this, we make these assumptions based on the skill set of agents. So often I did this as a supervisor in support. I just assumed my one person was my best support engineer for, let's say, databases, but I never validated that assumption, and years might go by. He may have not gotten any better, and I'm still thinking he's my best agent. This lets us start curating the training plan for agents. If they're struggling in areas and doing really well in other, we should make sure that the training we're giving to them in that same time window across all agents is unique to the agent. And this allows us to do that by having that feedback loop. Now, on the other side, we're taking all of that information and we're automating it. The first way we're automating it is by putting it in a CRM automatically. But if you think about one of the things that agents don't like to do or may find themselves in a time crunch for, it's the wrap-up call information. And a wrap-up is letting the system know exactly what that interaction was about. Is there a quick description I could give? Or am I using a unique identifier, such as customer complaint, that might be done for reporting afterwards? We can do all of that leveraging AI and make sure that that process is automated as well. This helps with reporting, and that transcript is there from voice, from chat, so that we can quickly learn as we go on. Now, the reason why we're collecting all of this data is to make sure that we can present it in the best way. And the problem with that is, as you get so much data, how do you actually leverage that? How do we surface up the meaningful moments within that data? So using AI again, we can start to cluster things that we're identifying. In the case of an insurance company, let's see if we were getting a lot of accidents being reported in from one geographical area. Maybe that's an alert that could show on my dashboard. Even better, if we see combinations of skills and maybe even combinations of words using speech analysis result in a really, really good interaction with the customer, we want to call that out as well. So we want to surface up these moments that are learnable, surface up these moments that are actionable, and AI allows us to do that with all the data we have here. So again, that was just a quick walkthrough of how we have a customer that simply got an email that they were interested in clicking into, and we capitalized on that moment to not just greet them and triage the interaction, but get them to the right agent at the right moment and make sure that all that information is not only learned from in terms of a feedback loop, but represented correctly in our real-time analytics. Oh, Claire, I think
we might have... It looks like you're on mute, Claire.
Hello again. Really interesting, Josh. Thank you, Joe, for that demo. And what was interesting, I thought, was that there were several examples within that of using this technology, obviously, to drive efficiency in these processes. Well, on the other hand, there were some examples of where you're clearly using it to build customer intimacy and deal with the customer on their own terms and offer a more personalized response. So what's your response to that question about intimacy versus efficiency?
Yeah, and I love that question. I think, so as we look at this slide, so often we think of it as one or the other, that you have to choose. And that's not really the case. And I wanted to talk about that today because what we're seeing is that AI is largely driven by efforts to improve customer efficiency initially. But strategic focus will shift towards customer intimacy as we go. And this is something the report highlighted. And oddly enough, I think we showed that a bit with the poll session today, in that we are looking at meeting that avalanche of interactions as we talked about earlier. So many interactions are coming in through so many different channels. We have to address that first, but a byproduct of that is a more personalized experience. So just to note on that, we think about front-ending those interactions with chatbots and voice bots so that we enable better call steering. We understand what's going on at that moment through web analytics like Alto Cloud. And now we're making real-time decisions with machine learning to make sure that that experience to the customer is unique to what they're actually experiencing at this moment. And so the last thing here is that we had an interesting data point. A Gartner report showed that greater customer intimacy is top of the list for 62% of chief data officers. So I think we are starting to see that trend now, that they want to capitalize on that information they're receiving. Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. And in some of the data that I shared earlier, we looked at region by region and what's happening in different markets about AI. What do you see as the regional outlook and how companies are using technology? Yes, and this again was one of those really interesting pieces of the report that it's cool to see that perspective. And I think some of the things that we noticed, just starting with the top left of this map here, was with North America, this was largely driven by customer expectations. Customers are expecting more, and they're expecting it at any time. The ability to give that great customer experience across these channels is done through AI. It really takes it up to another level. And as we come for, maybe looks at South America, like Latin America here, we noticed that it was a bit different. So they noted that efficiency rather than intimacy is the primary AI investment driver. But they did have some concerns about that driving too much efficiency and losing intimacy was a fear. In fact, there was a really good quote within the report, and it was by the director of customer experience at the Brazilian credit card payments Cielo. He noted that Brazilians are not very confrontational, and so some customers will only indicate their dissatisfaction with us in really an indirect way. What that means is we can use AI to automate some of that experience and then use a human being to actually really understand the moments that are worth noting as dissatisfied. And so moving over to the right side of the map here, starting with EMEA, we noticed that this was AI to increase customer intimacy. But there were some differences here and some things that were unique in that European customer experience executives had lower expectations that AI would continue to deliver significant improvements in the coming year. And I think some of this comes back to GDPR. With privacy regulations increasing, as we drive intimacy, is it considered invasive? And this is something that we're starting to tackle globally as well. And lastly, one I wanted to point out was in APAC. So last but not least, but they did share that strategic concern again of prioritizing efficiency over intimacy. Oddly enough, we noticed that they were seeing some of the largest amount of automated experiences, and the report attributed that to really just it being a data-savvy market. A good example, China and the embracement of WeChat as a payment process, as a communications platform, has driven the ability to really make this possible.
Yeah. And we're also seeing the impact of GDPR in other research that we're doing. Actually, executives are quite concerned about the dampening effect that it could have on AI development generally. And I interviewed a professor at the School of Law here in Singapore, and one of the things that they're thinking about is how do you communicate to consumers the benefit of sharing their data versus protecting their data privacy. So it's a very interesting and emerging space. Definitely we see in Asia that it's very much a mobile first society, and people are quite happy to share their data for the greater good in certain circumstances.
Wow.
So let's now talk about staff and agents. What do you see with your customers as the agent reaction to the rollout of this technology? Is it a good thing? Are they happy about it? What's their experience?
Yes, and this has been one that we've seen quite a bit, even in just engaging with customers too. And I think the initial thought process is if you were to ask a human to memorize millions of websites and then respond with the right website if someone asked you where to go next, that would seem impossible. And that's what a basic search engine was in 1998. On the flip side, are we expecting bots to really understand humans' emotions, as the credit card union pointed out in Brazil? And there's things that we as people do. We understand the sentiment, we understand complex problems, and we're able to draw the comparisons together. There was a really good quote in the report from TELUS, a Canadian telecommunications company, and I want to bring that up because he pointed out that over time, data started to tell a different story. So initially, agents were really off-put by AI being used in the contact center. And they noticed that within 6 months, they took a voice of the agent report for all of their employees, and they started to love the inclusion of AI because it allowed them to work on more meaningful tasks. And it actually enabled a lot more in terms of the humans being human and getting to be involved in that process. Anecdotally, I noticed that as well. When I was in support, so much of my time was spent on routine interactions like password resets or common questions that we were simply giving links to these common questions. So if I had more of that time to focus on the really fun engagements or really making an impact in someone else that needs customer support, that's meaningful to me. And one other thing to point out about this, these interactions aren't decreasing. And again, we pointed that out, that when we open the floodgates in a sense, we're not seeing a decrease in voice and an increase in chatbots. Rather, people are just engaging more. So this experience allows us to drive that better customer experience for them through efficiency and response and intimacy when they really do receive that human engagement. And so after all my babbling, the reason why I have this slide here is to talk about how those technologies come together. And that comes down to a Gartner point, which we noted that as workers start to see AI in action, they're less likely to believe it's going to reduce jobs. And that's not a negative sentiment, rather an understanding that they work hand in hand. Humans are amazing at conversational intelligence. They intuitively are collaborative, and they understand sentiment. Bots, on the other hand, are perfect when we think about these multi-channel journeys, understanding the context and making the next best actions around that, like AutoCloud in our demo today. And rapid search, These search engines, these chat tools that can bring back the best FAQ articles are helpful not just to the customer, but helping the agent as they go in through those responses as well.
And that's consistent with what we found in the survey. About 65% of the companies said that they found a noticeable, measurable improvement in agent satisfaction since they started rolling out AI.
That's great.
So the question of AI and ethics, what's the right thing to do, is gaining a lot of attention. If you look at the press, you see stories about, how scary AI is. And what has been Genesys' response to this emerging question about AI and ethics?
Yeah, and this is a very deep topic. In fact, I think there's been a lot of good reports that said it's going to be tough to understand how to tackle this. And the idea of making hard guidelines is also a very tough thing to go through. So as I'm showing a slide on guidelines, one of the first things I want to point out is they were meant to be a topic of discussion. And this is something we thought about. There's a really good quote by Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, and it was, "Ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do." Now, this ethical discussion hasn't actually stopped. It's not a situation where all of a sudden with AI, ethics are now important. Rather, as Gordon Sexton, a business practice manager at Genesys, put it, it's the difference between a musket and a sniper rifle. So the same purpose, but much more accurate power now. And what we did at Genesys was really, we focused on forming a cross-functional team for AI ethics that included our executives, engineering, human resources, even product management, to put this out for discussion. So these guidelines were created as an initial attempt to say, this is our North Star, this is on the table, do we agree with this? And one of the things that we've done along with that is we've published a blog post for each guideline so that we're anchoring down this story. We're not just saying, hey, be more transparent, rather showing a story where transparency was beneficial or where transparency was actually an issue. And now we know that there's things to avoid when we look at the AI ethical questions here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's should lead us into some questions from the audience. Shall we take a look?
Absolutely. I think one of the first questions I see here is just about how do we get started. So I can kick us off, but as we think about how do we get started, this is a great question. We've talked about a lot today. We've talked about how customers have taken advantage of it already. Don't be worried about that. Sometimes getting started is just really going for the quick wins. And when we think about automation, we think about identity and verification, even moments of just leveraging chatbots to triage the conversation. If you were to walk into a restaurant, you're greeted by a host, they ask how many people are in your party and where would you like to sit? This technology can do that in a conversational way so that when we do route to an agent, we're cutting down the handle time on those routine moments of just understanding what the problem is and allowing us to focus on that real human engagement. So I think quick wins like that are a great way to get started and start collecting data so that you can make better decisions.
So there's a question that I can take is, do you have some examples of the CX leaders that we're referencing? So when I was talking about the survey earlier, we actually did a cut of this data looking at the top 10% of the respondents in terms of customer experience and brand recognition and market performance. And so the subset of the survey that scored the highest on those three elements, we identified as the customer experience leaders. And we've contrasted those throughout the final report.
Yeah. And just another one I see in here, it was a great question from Jing about, after a response that was suggested by AI, how much time are customers willing to wait when we think about that predictive engagement? And actually, that is a piece of the puzzle, and that we want to look at some of the studies that have shown customers are willing to wait upwards of even 3 minutes if they're given to the perfect agent or the best agent within that time frame, as opposed to just being routed to anyone and being transferred. What we notice is that by the second transfer, people start to lose faith in the experience and they feel that they're not actually going to get an answer. From an AI standpoint, I think we really have to look at machine learning and identify, do we have the right agent available now? If not, how long will we have to wait for the best agent at this moment? And use machine learning to really understand, based around our business outcome here. So in this case, it was upsell capability. In some cases, it might be NPS, or that customer satisfaction score. How long can we wait before we start to decrease that score to get the better person? So it is, in a way, a seesaw of, you have to pick the best person right now or the best person later, knowing that the business outcome is NPS or is upsell ability. So that's defined by the customer there. Let's see, do we have anything else? I do see one question, Claire, I could take about what is the difference or value proposition of this AI bot from Genesis versus third parties? And I love this question because this is something that I'm interested in as a hobby, not just as a job. And a big thing for us was an open AI framework. We believe that you should be able to use the bots you're creating. We believe you should be able to use the best technologies that are out there. And so the framework we built is inclusive of that. You shouldn't have to choose if you'd like to use Google Dialogflow or Genesis Dialog Engine or even Amazon Lex. Rather, you can choose when to use them. That's a big thing that we're very proud of, is being inclusive of those. We have a lot of customers that have built their own bots, and they're amazing. That should be a part of your customer experience. You shouldn't be locked into an ecosystem there, especially when we think about the data we can learn from that.
Mm-hmm. So, Joe, a question here. What's the accuracy rate in some of the predictive engagement AI?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think it depends on the use case itself and really the data we have. So an initial one that we started looking at was around in a bank. So if I am filling out a loan and I abandon that loan, I always joke, my cat likes to attack my computer. Maybe she knocked over water on my keyboard and now I abandoned that loan. So there's a lot of things that come into the way of knowing when to reach out. I don't actually have numbers. That's something I'd love to follow up on actually from this webinar. But one of the things we really focus on is the more data you have, the better you understand when to reach out via chat or to offer an additional channel like email, maybe even a text message that branches off of that. So it's not always the same channel as well as we look at when to reach out.
Mm-hmm. And there's another question here. Have we looked at the complete digital customer journey prior to call routing? So for non-voice digital users. So I think your demo looked at the sort of the online journey prior to call routing. Would you talk a bit more about that?
Absolutely. And I think this kind of goes back to that point we mentioned of where's the loop coming from? So if I had a phone call that was about maybe even an order or customer support, my next interaction could potentially be linked to that. One of the things we've been doing is focusing on building these chatbots or voice bots once and allowing them to exist on every channel. So what that means is the data points they're leveraging, CRM and web data and previous interactions, we're not looking at that as a siloed channel rather than just moments that we've met. And if you think about that in a personal relationship, when I reach out to my wife, it might be a text, it might be a phone call, but in my mind, it was just an interaction. It doesn't need to be clarified. And this is really important when we think about the context here, is that all of these moments should be brought in. If customers invest their time with us, that has to be a part of the routing strategy.
Yeah. So we've got another interesting question here, quite a broad question, which is how will AI change our educational system? And I guess it's not clear from the question whether we're talking about within organizations or within society. So let's tackle it from organizations. Joe, what are you seeing about how companies are doing training or getting staff to work with AI?
Yeah, I think initially it's just about explaining it. So how can we start that people understand what AI is and what AI isn't? The first thing that many people might think of is Terminator, so I don't have that in my slide, but that's not what we're looking at, this general AI that's going to take over everything. And it's about anchoring that down with story and real use cases. So that education starts with just the base level of what can we do with these tools today. And there's a lot of great open courses out there that MIT's putting out, that Stanford has put out, that allow other people to really understand data science and machine learning at a greater level. I do think that we're seeing on our end, companies are investing in that knowledge or that retraining of people to understand how to use these tools better. And the agent side, we're leveraging the ability to take these agents and start training those chatbots so that the chatbots and the voice bots do a better job at handling the basic interactions so that, again, humans can really focus on the meaningful moments. What do you think, Claire? What have you seen there?
We're seeing new classes of jobs being created and also new skills being required within existing jobs. So some of the companies that we've been speaking to have been creating roles called AI trainer, where they take experts within the function and actually train them up on how to train the AI. So reviewing the AI's decisions, creating tools that other employees can use to understand what's going on, to increase transparency and explainability about what's happening in the function, so that everyone is feeling more comfortable. And it's seen quite often as an area of prestige when staff are trained to work with this technology, like it's a new skill. It's a very, as we know, for anyone who's tried to hire somebody with AI skills, it's very highly in demand. So it's seen as a benefit. And but I think just more broadly, that question is very, very interesting. Like just in societies, how will the educational systems respond to the growing use of technology in our workplaces? Just looking at AI, MIT, we created a new school in the past year, the Schwarzman College of Computing, that's going to look at how AI will affect all different areas of industry and society, to create leaders, future leaders who have this real blend of technology and business experience to understand the implications of it across the wider issues.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. I know we've got a few questions coming in and we only have a little bit of time, so I promise we'll get back out to these as well. There was another one that caught my eye that I really liked, and it was from Paul, and he asked about looking at hold time post-chat. So in our example today, we started with a chat and we transitioned to another channel. And the idea is if I spend 20 minutes with a bot and then hold for 15 minutes, that's never a good customer experience. He's absolutely right. I think one of the things we need to keep in mind within AI is not siloing the data and not siloing the customer journey across that. So if we know that no one's going to be available for 20 minutes, can we offer an alternative? Could we offer a callback at a later time that they choose? That's something that needs to be decided on. And as we look at like really the future of this, I think this is where we learn too. How long can we wait before getting the right answer is less important than getting on the phone as quickly as possible to triage that. And these are things that we learn from at scale.
So we're just coming up to time, but there's a question here from Tracy that I will address. And talking about the future growth in interactions, and I showed that chart earlier about how transaction volume is expected to really grow in the coming years. And what we saw consistently when we spoke to executives and we interviewed them for this report is as soon as they expand the available touch points, the customer touch points that are available, that transaction volume will grow significantly. So I don't think that we saw examples where transaction volume is decreasing, but what will happen is that it would be only a certain proportion of those that are getting through to human agents because a lot of them are handled earlier in the chain. So I hope that answers your question. So I think we're up against time now.
Yes. I think we
That's
can hand
okay,
it back
though.
to Josh. Yeah.
Yep, I'll go ahead and take over. So unfortunately, everybody, I do apologize, but that is all the time that we have. So I want to thank our speakers for answering those great questions. But unfortunately, since this is the last of our time, we won't be able to answer any more live. However, go ahead and continue to throw your questions, if you have more, into the Q&A window before today's session ends, and we'll make sure that we follow up with you soon within the next few business days after the webinar. You'll also have the opportunity, if you want to just email myself at onlineevents@genesis.com with no caps or spaces with the title of the webcast and the subject line, and we'll make sure to respond as promptly as we can. So with that, I want to go over a couple things real fast before we close. To wrap, don't forget to take advantage of those additional resources within the resource list at the bottom middle. Clicking those will open up in a new tab and expand even more on today's excellent topic, giving you some additional information as well. And also, if you could please fill out that survey that's going to show up automatically after the webcast is closed, we'd greatly appreciate that feedback. So with all that being said, on behalf of Claire, Joe, and the entire Genesis team, I want to thank you again for joining today's webcast, Humans and Bots, How to Blend Human Skills and AI to Build Customer Intimacy and Drive Growth. Until next time, have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.